This debate is between the incumbent Ward 6 school committee member and the challenger for school committee. Their names are Ruth Goldman, who is a Newton South graduate, current parent, former PTO co-chair, and she has a 30-year career in nonprofit and philanthropy. She was first elected to the school committee in 2013 and has served as chair of the school committee since 2017. And Ms. Goldman is at the end of the table. Welcome to the panel this evening, Ruth.
Thanks for hosting, Ken.
And the other candidate is Galina Rosenblit. She is running for the first time for public office. She's been a Newton resident for 18 years, and she has taught in public and private schools for 40 years. Welcome, Ms. Rosenblit.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
So I will be asking each candidate a question and then allowing the other candidate to respond. They'll each have to answer the question as well. They'll each have 30 seconds initially, although they may be given more time for additional comments and rebuttal as needed. And from time to time, I will ask follow-up questions. We will also, in the later portion of the debate, have an opportunity for each candidate to ask the other candidate one question, and they will each be given an opportunity to make some closing remarks. So without further ado, let's get to the first question. And I will start with the incumbent, Ms. Goldman. Sorry. An important part of education is learning from mistakes and constantly improving. Please identify a mistake you made or the school committee made during your 6 years on the school committee and what you've learned from it.
So I think of a very current issue with our Horace Mann community. We recently moved them out of the building at 687 Watertown Street into a new building at 225 Nevada Street. And while it's the school committee would agree that it's a vast improvement in space, it's a much more up-to-date building with over $20 million invested. The process for engaging parents and teachers in the move was not up to our normal standard, and it has resulted in a lot of pain for that community, and I would absolutely have done a much more inclusive process over the past year.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenblit. Well, let me ask you, you aren't on the school committee. I'm going to ask you a slightly different version of the same
Please.
question, which is, in your professional life as an educator, what is a mistake you've made, and what have you learned from it?
I made many mistakes, and I'll tell you, I'm still learning from my mistakes. I'm working as a teacher about 40 years probably, and I'm learning every day, and this is the beauty of my profession. I'm getting better and better, and I'm rewarded by the love and respect of families and children, and it's not possible to be the same thing 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 1 year ago. You have to improve yourself constantly. I taught different subjects. Right now, for the last 19 years, I'm teaching mathematics in the private tutoring school. And believe me that there is huge field and huge amount of work to be improved.
Okay. Thank you. Another aspect of education is setting goals. What is your top priority goal for a policy you'd like to see implemented or a policy change you'd like to see made for the Newton Public Schools in the next 2 years, should you be elected? Ms. Rosenblit, I'll let you go first.
If I'm elected, number one, why I'm running, I want to give my knowledge, my expertise to this city, which I call my home for the last 18 years. And it's pretty easy to state that right now, Massachusetts public schools average on 53rd ranking spot in Massachusetts. So many schools are in front of us. I'm not talking about Lexington. I'm talking about Lincoln, Long Meadow, Massachusetts. I'm talking about Ashland. I'm talking about Dedham. And I think since I'm working as a product of public schools, I know how to improve mathematics.
improving math would be your goal. You got to the answer to the question at the end there, I guess. Ms. Goldman, what is something you'd like to change or implement in the next 2 years?
We have a whole series of system-wide goals, and I think the one that I'm most concerned about is closing the achievement gap for all our students, particularly our low-income Black and Brown and our special education students. And recently we initiated some connectedness surveys because we believe when students feel safe and taken care of socially and emotionally, they are able to improve their academic performance. There's a lot of good data around that. And I don't actually feel like we need to change that. I just think we need to really work on that in a more concerted way.
Thank you. The next question will go to Ms. Goldman first. The largest part of the school department budget and the city budget as well, I believe over 80%, is salaries. And therefore, because the school department has a fixed allocation, every dollar spent on salary increases is a dollar that's not available to hire new staff to reduce class size. How do you balance the priorities of attracting and retaining excellent teachers with the importance of maintaining low class sizes?
Right now we have the lowest average class sizes in Newton, particularly at our elementary schools. Our high schools, as Counselor Schwartz mentioned, we are seeing the bubble go from middle to high school. I think we all know, even though we're in one of our fabulous new buildings, that the heart and soul of our school district are all our educators as well as our custodians and secretarial staff. And we need to continue to attract top-notch teachers. I know Galina is a teacher, and that is the most important thing we need to do. I think we need to just really focus on that right now, and and use our budget wisely.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenblit. Would you like me to repeat the
yes,
question?
Yes, please, if possible.
Okay, sure. So there's a balance to be achieved between resources for salary increases and resources for having more teachers and thereby having fewer students per classroom. What is your approach to achieving that balance?
My approach to achieving this balance is to start with teachers. First of all, I read a lot about teachers' requirements and teachers' demands, but nowhere I found exact numbers what increase they're looking for. So I know that last year they had increased 6%, which to me it's pretty good increase. So this year I would say we cannot cut on teacher salaries. That's why I think we have, like any other company, I would look for overhead. What is the area to save some money? I know in 2015, for example, school department had research on custodian service, and they found that it's possible to save $3 million. Nothing was done to save $3 million.
Thank you, Ms. Rosenblit. The next question I would like to ask is about maintenance. Newton has a unique feature in our city charter where there is a cap on the percentage of the city budget of the school department budget that can be spent on maintenance, and yet we haven't approached this cap in recent years. So my question is simply, do you think we're doing enough to maintain our school buildings, and if not, what would you do differently? I believe Ms. Rosenblit goes first on this one.
This is a hard question for me to answer because I haven't been in each school and haven't seen all the buildings, and I don't have enough information. But as a person with education, first electrical engineering and after that teaching, I think with experts, with advice of knowledge person, I always can find the answer. Is it good? How is maintenance, what the level on maintenance right now and what's supposed to be done? I think I'm pretty quick learner.
Okay. Thank you.
You've asked a great question, Ken. So We do, and when you talk about balance between spending resources on faculty and programs for students versus other expenses, one of the few other expenses is our charter maintenance category. So I think we have actually, in the last 6 years, our school committee has been exceptionally committed to getting that charter maintenance up as high as we can. And typically, if we find ourselves at the end of the year with a little extra one-time money, that's where we put it, because it's a good place for one-time money. So it's absolutely a key priority.
Do you think we're doing a good enough job? Is the city putting enough resources into maintaining our existing buildings?
I think there's some buildings that I don't think are going to benefit from a lot more resources because we need a new building. But I think I think we've improved a lot in the last few years, but we can always put more money into our school buildings, for sure.
Since I gave a little extra time to the school committee chair, Ms. Rosenblit, would you like to add anything on this topic?
So far, we have enough space for all the students to accommodate, every Newton student. I know it's less than 13,000 students in Newton, and we have enough space for everyone. I'm for fixing older buildings and spend less money, because we have many other, sources we have to spend our money. I don't know if I have more time, because
I think the red
red
sign means...
I'm afraid of red.
Okay, thank you. But you'll get a chance to talk about another topic now.
I'm frozen.
As public schools, all of our schools are primarily funded through property taxes. We get some money from the state and from some other sources. But historically, the city has, the school department has implemented a number of fees for after-school sports and extracurricular activities. And Mike, let me start with this part of the question is, do you think that there should be fees for these optional activities, the extracurricular activities, or do you think that they should be part of a free education? Galina? Ms. Rosenblit?
It's okay. Galina is fine. To me, it sounds pretty fair, because parents are still paying extra money for extra activities after school. I know, because of my students. My school is private school. Parents have to pay money. Now, they pay for musical classes. They pay for sport activities, not only in school. So small fee, to me, sounds pretty reasonable. It should be small fee if these activities go through the school.
Okay.
Very small fee.
Ms. Goldman.
I'm not really a fan of fees, and I would love for them to disappear. I also know that we collect a significant amount of money in optional after-school fees that are also combined with a very active outreach to families who can't afford those fees, and there's a lot of waiving of fees, and there's a lot of knowledge of families that we know can't pay and really reaching out to them. But I don't know where else we'd get that money, and I think we still want to offer breadth of program. We want to pay our teachers well. So right now, unless we increase our allocation from the city significantly, I think there is not a lot of choice.
So let me ask you a follow-up question, if I may, please. There has recently, this past fall, and within the last couple months, been some email communication to middle school parents at the various middle schools in Newton that there will now be fees for middle school math workbooks, which appear to be a required part of their math education. Was that just a mistake that it seems to be being rolled back or walked back? And I guess just more generally, how do you feel about the idea of fees for required academic materials?
I don't think there should be fees for any required academic materials, and we did eliminate that fee. We rolled out a brand new math curriculum that is really terrific and top-notch, and we've gotten great feedback on it. One of the difficulties, and frankly, I think this is a little bit about corporate greed, the company that developed the curriculum, instead of having a textbook which we purchase one time and then use for many years, There is a workbook/textbook that needs to be bought every year for every student. And the school district, without knowledge of school committee, I might add, determined that a small portion of that workbook textbook, because the student would own it, was assigned to the student, but we have dropped that fee.
And did that happen at a recent meeting? When did that decision get made to drop the fee?
We got a lot of, and sometimes we get parent feedback and we just determine that we're not going to pursue something.
So I'm sorry, when you say we, though, what is the process? Was that a vote at a school committee meeting?
No, it wasn't a vote at a school committee. It was never a vote at a school committee. There's gray area in fees. There's fees that we know about as school committee. This was something sort of that we didn't know about, honestly.
There have been some recent changes to standardized testing in Massachusetts, and Newton has made some choices about which standardized testing model to go with. There have been two schools of thought on standardized testing. One is that it measures and performance and forces improvement, and another is that it can degrade the quality of education because the teachers tend to teach to the test and it limits the scope of what's taught. Which philosophy is consistent with what you think, and or maybe you, what are your thoughts on that topic? I'll start with Ms. Goldman.
I'm probably somewhere towards the side of I think we need some standardized assessment, but I think that, and we do a good job of this in Newton, I think more regular in-house formative and summative assessments that really assess the ability of children to learn is the curriculum that's been set forth by the district. And we do have some really good assessments that we use internally that parents never see to really understand how well our children are learning math, reading, all sorts of things. I think there's some need for standardized testing, but I think that the pendulum has swung too far in one direction. Students, it's an important topic. Students spend too much time taking the tests and teaching to the tests.
Thank you, Ms. Goldman. Ms. Rosenblit, standardized testing, what do you think?
I am for standard test, but I'm against standard test. If the standard is high, I'm for it. But if the standard is lowered, like, for example, do you know that Massachusetts is #1 in the United States by academic achievement and by math? #1 in the United States. But it's with Newton is number 50, I'll tell you, 53 and 59 in Massachusetts. So,
by what measure are we number 53?
Right now,
number
I'm talking
59?
about not just math.
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 And the MCAS, are we talking about?
No,
or?
it's a standard everything. They take everything in middle school, in high school. Right now, the number 53, 59. Right now, this is for Newton South and Newton North.
This is math performance,
Math performance.
at the high schools.
Newton North is 59th in Massachusetts. Newton South is 53rd in Massachusetts.
And is that where did you get these numbers?
I'll tell you exactly. Give me 1 second.
Because we've heard lots of numbers thrown around.
No.
In these,
I got used to it. So I have a couple of reports, and one of them is from WBUR, which owned and operated by trustees of Boston University. The second one is the United States News and World Report.
Are these the high school, their overall high school ratings? Okay. Anyway, okay.
It's math proficiency.
Math
in math
proficiency.
proficiency for Newton South High and for Newton North. That's why it depends what is the test. For example, if you ask me what I prefer standard teaching of mathematics, which combines two systems, Western, which is more logic, and Eastern, which is memorizing. I'm more for logic and less for memorizing.
Okay, I'll let you have a little extra time, so I'm going to let Ms. Goldman weigh in on the issue of whether we're performing as well as we should be in math in the Newton Public Schools.
I think our students perform we produce excellent mathematicians, and we have a curriculum that's very demanding. We, just as I said, have instituted a new curriculum at the elementary and middle schools, and actually we have some assessment data on our middle school curriculum that's as high as we've ever had. I think these national kind of like U.S. and News Report rankings can be very deceptive. Newton's actually a very diverse district, and often these are representative really of the socioeconomic status of a community. I don't think they're terribly relevant.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenblit, I'll let you go first on this one. How would you rate the performance of the Newton Superintendent of Schools?
I think many subjects on his agenda are extras. For example, I know that math, since I'm a teacher, I'm more concerned about teaching kids. This is number one for me. And many times, for example, math curriculum was they make the new one, they rewrite the old ones, they develop the new ones. I think it's a waste of time and money, for example. Why? Because by the same ranking, Singapore systems in mathematics is number one in the world. It's a small country, a little bit more than 3 million population. All their textbooks are in English, and all of them are published. You can find everything. They use both systems, Western and Eastern. I don't know, why do we have to spend money and time to invent the wheel?
Thank you.
This is my answer.
It was a question about the superintendent.
Yes, so my question is, you obviously, as the chair of the school committee, work closely with the superintendent. I'll make it a little more focused for you. There's an assessment that's done of the superintendent. What would you think the superintendent's biggest area of need for improvement would be, based on that assessment that you performed?
I think based on that assessment, I think the areas of strength that David Fleischman brings are his areas of leadership and building a team. I think some of the areas that we ask him to focus on more are building a more diverse faculty in Newton that's more reflective of our student population. That's an area that's come up. I think focusing more on dealing with, helping staff deal more with bullying and other issues that have caused distress for students in schools is another issue. But overall, I think we all agree that he's doing an excellent job.
Let me follow up on the topic of bullying and no place for hate, and generally the mental health and happiness and stress level of students in the Newton Public Schools. Is there anything that you think we could be doing better or differently to make the environment in our schools more conducive to learning? And that's Ms. Goldman.
I mean, I think there's always work we can do in that area. We've done, and I think really the focus now is probably more on the high schools, and I think there's tension there. Schools can do a lot to provide a community that feels safe and supportive, but we also need to partner more with our families. We've been doing that at the elementary schools. We have a social emotional program in the schools, and we've trained our parents in some of those techniques, responsive classroom, responsive home. I think in the high schools we need to engage our parents more as well. If the school's giving a message that you need to, take classes that don't stress you out as much, but your parents are focused on you taking many, many classes, then there's a kind of conflict there.
Ms. Rosenblit, what would you do to make the environment in the schools more conducive to learning?
I would make learning in school fun. When children come to school and they're 5, 6, 7 years old, they're in a good mood. They like everything, and you can teach them whatever you want. Why, when they're in high school, their mood is changed? And this is what I'm sorry for quoting, because I've tried to be prepared for this meeting. And this is the quoting from the last week Newton Tab article. Most likely, this year, about 80 Newton High School students will try to kill themselves. Another 400 will purposely harm themselves. Since 2012, Newton Health and Human Services has published the result of the CDC survey. The figures about the same every year. Why it happens, it doesn't happen in elementary school. Why it happens in high school? Probably the school is not fun, sometimes not safe, sometimes no pleasure place to be.
I gave Ms. Rosenblit a little extra time, so I'll give you 15 seconds, Ms. Goldman, to respond.
I
on
mean,
that.
I think Ms. Rosenblit's raising the results of the recent Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and we have seen a very flat curve on our attempt or thinking about suicide or suicide ideation and attempt. I think it's difficult to compare with elementary students, that developmentally elementary students tend not to think about suicide. We have instituted a lot of different programs over the last years, and if you want me to go on, I can talk about them.
I would love to hear more, but that'll have to be on another day in another forum because we are under some strict time constraints. Thank you for that answer, though. We're now at the portion of the program where you get to ask each other an education-related question. And Ms. Goldman, please ask your question first.
Ms. Rosenblit, I was just curious, you didn't attend the Special Education Forum last week that was hosted by our Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and I just wondered if you could talk about how you think about special education, and they were eager to hear from you, any message you have for our special education parents.
To know something about special education, you don't have to attend just one meeting. I do deal in my school with some special education children. What can I tell you? As more you include special education children in regular class, the better. Even after-school program, they benefit so much from after-school program. You can't imagine. I'm for special education, but I think you have to keep the child as less as possible with one teacher. You have to expose the child to the real life.
Okay. Ms. Rosenblit, do you have a question for Ms. Goldman?
Yes, I do, and I prepared one question. Nothing personal. Why the work of school committee chair, under whose leadership Newton Public Schools are ranking on average 53rd math in Massachusetts, while city is saturated by math tutoring school, and annual rate of 80 suicide attempts and 400 attempts to harm themselves by school student is such an accomplishment that current school committee chair shall be reelected?
Okay, that's sort of two questions in one question. So just to talk, I mean, I don't know what the ranking on math comes from. I know that we have a very successful math program in our schools, and kids are challenged at math at all levels. Our new curriculum really works to help support kids who struggle with math and also provide challenge for them. We also know that Newton is a wealthy district, and parents choose to spend a lot of money on after-school programs in the hopes that their children will be successful getting into many, many different colleges in our country. Math is one area where parents spend a lot of money. There's also sports, athletics. We have wonderful sports teams at our high schools, but we know that students go and participate in club activities at great expense.
Thank you. We now have an opportunity for each candidate to make a closing statement of 30 seconds, and we'll start with the incumbent, Ms. Goldman. Go ahead.
So I have had a great experience on school committee. I think I've been able to offer leadership in a number of areas, including closing the achievement gap, modernizing our school buildings, and ensuring that Newton provides a healthy, wholesome, well-rounded education for all our students. I would like your vote on November 5th to be reelected. I have 2 more years left, and then I will sail off into the sunset.
Ms. Rosenblit.
I think as a teacher, of public schools and private schools, with my experience, will benefit a lot and find new ways to improve the work of school committee. I have no conflict of interest to be on committee. I have no children in Newton Public School. I have no grandchildren in Newton Public School. I never worked for Newton Public Schools, and I'm not planning to work for Newton Public Schools. I just want to give back to the community which I liked, which I love, and very diverse community. And I want to improve the place which I call home. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for you, and
Thank you, Ken,
people.
and thank you to the area council.
Look at this weather, and you're here. Thank you so
And
much.
to paraphrase Bob Dylan, thank you all for holding off your applause, but now is the time for your cheers.